I'm Tracy Frayne from the University of Western Australia here in Perth, and I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone in this session. This paper titled From the Classroom to the Future, What Are the Links? Is being shared with us by the author, and I'm going to try very hard to get this right, Gudrun Geisdottir.
Excellent. That was excellent.
Thank you. The Associate Professor of Education, Director of the Centre of Teaching and Learning from the University of Iceland. So this session will be 30 minutes long. So if you'd like to ask questions, please add them via the questions tab to the right that you'll just see up there of the session, and these will be addressed in the final 10 minutes. And so I'll let Gudrun know when it's going to be the final 10 minutes. I'll also be popping out at that time, but I'll be in the very capable hands of Gudrun to discuss and answer any questions. Okay.
Thank you so much, Tracy. and I know you, but I thank you for being here today. I hope you didn't come also yesterday when I messed up my times. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to come here and discuss this again. And thank you, Tracy, for the introduction. And this is work that I've been doing with my colleagues, Anna Ólafsdóttir and Valgerður S. Bjarnadóttir. And if you could turn the slide. So this is the research that I want to tell you a bit about, and this is kind of a two-folded paper, because I want to tell you about a research, but then I also want to ask you to reflect with me on the findings of the research as an insight into academic development. But it's a part of a large research project that we've been doing for 3 years, and it's coming to an end now in December. It's a collaborative work between staff at 2 universities, University of Iceland and then University of Akureyri up north. And it has both a philosophical part and an empirical part. So I'm only discussing the empirical part of the empirical findings. And the aim of the project is to critically analyze the complex relationship between universities and democracy in a democratic societies. And it takes a philosophical view. So we have three philosophers who are doing that part, and then we have the empirical part, which is the one I'm talking about. Next one. So just to give you a little bit of the context, I don't know if you have been to Iceland, but Iceland is a small, maybe a large country, but a small nation. It is a nation of 360,000 people. So we are in an average town, in a small town in other countries, but yet we have 7 higher education institutions that are allowed to call themselves universities. And the oldest one is the one on the top, University of Iceland, which was founded in 1911 and is by far the largest one. And then, for example, that has this year about 13,000 students, and the smallest one has 120 students. So you see these are very varied institutions, and you see actually the pictures of the 3 universities that we did our research in. The University of Iceland, then comes the University of Akureyri up north, and then the last is the University in Reykjavik at the bottom. Turn. And so we were interested in the role of university in democracy, and in the landscape that we all know. Have we forgotten the democratic purpose of higher education? Was kind of the underlying question. What is the purpose? Are universities something that has a role in the modern society, and what kind of role does it have? And both the 2012 and the 2018 Bologna communique really stress that universities are key contributors to the development of democracy, human rights protection, and sustainable growth. They are seen as very important in these documents. But we also know that in the last decades, universities have very much been seen as important for the economic growth, and maybe the democratic role has been less obvious at times. So there, at some stage, we have seen a shift from the public good to the more private good. This situation, which you probably all know who work in universities, and you can feel it in your everyday practice, it's been felt in Iceland as well as other places around the world. The next one. But what is democratic education? And truly, believe me, I'm not going to go into that. That is a very difficult field to discuss. But like Sant in a paper from 2019 gives a really good overview of various meanings that people put into, or authors put into that concept. There are different meanings and definitions and different stances. But we like Shiro's definition. It says education must mobilize students to be critically engaged agents, attentive to important social issues, and alert to the responsibility of deepening and expanding the meaning and practices of a vibrant democracy. So we are, democratic education means kind of educating really critical students who are willing to go out and make their mark on society. But it does have, not only does the concept have different meanings, but also in an article or a research done by Roland, where he talked to academics in 3 different countries who had very different experience of democracy. The normative view that we have here, at least in Iceland, democracy is just the normal thing. That is, of course, not the case in all countries. So we are talking from, I'm speaking from a side where you already see democracy as a normal way of being. Okay, next. So this is what sparked our interest, among other things, is that we have a Higher Education Act from 2006. And in 2012, a sentence was added into Article 2, which is about the purpose of higher education. And they put in this little sentence saying, higher education institutions shall prepare students for responsible participation in a democratic society. So that was in 2012, very possibly in the wake of the economic crisis, which raised here in Iceland quite a number of critical questions about ethics and about public institutions' role and responsibility. So we did a discourse analysis of all the various policy documents of higher education in Iceland, looking for concepts like democracy, democratic practices, and so on. And we found no mention of that, even though many of the policy papers were quite new. This was not a concept that was mentioned as such. Next one. So here comes the study. So we did a study asking academics, does university have a role in society? And if so, what are we doing in terms of preparing our students for that? So we had semi-structured interviews with 26 experienced teachers from 3 universities, the University of Iceland and the University of Akureyri, which are public universities, and then the University of Reykjavik, which is a private university. And we selected 2 disciplinary fields. It was really difficult because these universities are different. They are different in structure and so on. But we figured we took 2 different, interviewed teachers from 2 different fields. And as I say, they are very different. I mean, in terms of aims and goals and policies and size and so on. But this paper is not focused on the differences. We also had different disciplinary differences, but I'm not going to discuss that not in this paper. It's outside the scope of that. Next one, please. So we asked the academics, does the university have a role in democracy? And the answer from all 26 was yes, yes, yes. They have a very important role. So there was no disagreement about that. Of course, they the role they then discussed was, there was variance in that, but it was sharing and creating knowledge, doing research. It was preparing students for their professional roles, often in a critical mode. They said critical democratic discourse. We need to withhold discussion in society that it's informed. We need to fight post-truth. We need to provide healthy opposition to those in powers, and so on and so on. So probably similar things you would find when you ask within your universities. And we also asked them about, sorry, we could go back, the Article 2. It was totally unknown. Nobody had heard of this. But they said it's a concept that's not often discussed. Democracy or democratic preparation is not often discussed, but the meaning is familiar, and it's just what we do anyway. So it's everyday educational professional praxis. Like somebody said, one of our respondents said, yes, we discussed this role, participation in community, but I don't remember having heard this concept democratic mentioned. Maybe that be the, okay, next one, please. And this role, as many other issues, is very rarely discussed. So, and it was put under the hat of saying, well, we rarely discuss teaching. So we rarely discuss the democratic role of universities. And it's because meetings are overloaded with practical issues. We need to discuss financial matters. How are we going to run this and run that? And also the individual ownership of courses. This is my course. I'm not discussing that with anybody else. So it's not a very much program level thinking. It's more of the individual. Everybody minds its own business in their own courses. But there were good examples, or many examples of ruptures of everyday practices due to internal or external forces, which created opportunities for discussion. It was policy making, quality enhancement procedures actually came out very positive. So people had to sit down and discuss what is the purpose of our discipline and so on. And then redesign of curriculum for various reasons, lack of students or too many students and so on. So, like one said, discussion within the faculty is never on democratic preparation formally, but the thing is that people can be talking about these issues without talking about democracy. You see, we are naturally often discussing how we can improve our teaching, how we can better engage our students, what kind of students we are graduating, and how we can better connect our teaching to the society. It's all, really good questions that are discussed. Next one. So we asked academics if we are preparing students for democratic participation, what kind of knowledge, what do they need to do, what skills and values do they need? And critical thinking really won that competition. Everybody said critical thinking is really essential. And of course, that's what we usually always connect with academic studies as well. Also preparing for the employment, educating professionals. Analytical skills were mentioned, competences in being able to work with others, data literacy, communication skills. These are common skills that were mentioned, and also values and attributes such as confidence, being able to say no to practices you dislike within your profession, to respect the truth, reflexivity, knowing your own prejudices, open-mindedness, being courageous and rational. I'm sorry. This is a quote for somebody from law, but we could also see that in other disciplines. In my discipline, democracy is the focus in everything. Adopting critical thinking, not taking everything for granted, not believing everything you are told. This is critical thinking, and being analytical is the main thing. Virtues we should both encourage and cultivate in the minds of the youngs that enroll into our universities. Next one. So, universities were very important for democracy. Students should be taught the skills, but how do you do it? And that was problematic for many of our interviewees to kind of connect that, saying, okay, let me think about that a little bit. But there were various teaching methods that were mentioned. Group work, discussion groups, active participation in all kinds of tasks, case method, problem-based teaching, team teaching, and so on. And there were also mentioned disciplinary tasks and topics that were seen as more relevant than others. So this one, we are dealing with this in my discipline. We are really working towards democratic practices. And also the teacher-student relation was seen as a part of democracy. In some kind of a dialogue, it's some kind of a dialogue and respect. And through your teaching, you should be developing this aspect unrelated to the content, just by the way you teach and relate to your students. So this came up in a couple of interviews that they said it's not only what the methods and the skills, but it's also the relationship you create, the atmosphere you create in your classroom. But when we asked about students' participation in regards to teaching and curriculum, that was very, very limited. Students were not really taken on board in a democratic way there. And the reasons were lack of student interest. I should say that our students usually are a bit older than on average in Europe, so they have obligations with family, and quite a number of them are working along with their studies. There was a lack of necessary knowledge. They don't really know. They can't select the topics. How are they supposed to know what's important? Student characteristics that came more in the private school, saying, well, we're teaching subjects to students who are nerds. They're not really interested in social activities. They don't know what Trump is talking about. They want to, deal with their computer sciences. So lack of student time and engagement. And in the university up north, many of the programs are distance education programs, and that was seen as very problematic to get students engaged in that way. But the legal framework for student representatives in the universities is really good, and that was accepted by everybody. Everybody thought, yeah, this is a good thing to do, but it was not very much supported. Some of them said, yeah, well, maybe we should have 2 students on board. They're not really listen. We don't listen to them very much, and so on. Next one. And of course, there was a lot of challenges mentioned. Many of them had to do with the students. They were not like we want them to be. They were disengaged. You had large groups. How are you going to create good group discussion in a lecture hall with 300 students? Students were not seen as academically well prepared. They were seen as seeing themselves as customs, so they were more demanding than they used to be. But there was also challenge based in regards to the conditions of teaching. The distance teaching was difficult to create good conditions for discussions and so on. There were large group and a lack of support, both technical and pedagogical. And some of them talked about lack of pedagogical knowledge and skills, saying something like, well, if you could tell me some methods that I could use, I would really be, willing to learn that. And of course, institutional or challenges as well, the low status of teaching, especially in the more research-focused institution, not always working in an environment that was supportive to that kind of approaches in teaching. So just very shortly from our abstract, we concluded that despite research, a lot of research and examples of practices advocating student engagement and active participation, academics still find it difficult to link what takes place in their classroom and courses to what Mann refers to as worldly becoming, and we would like to link to the preparing for the democratic participation. And there was a lack of significant conversation. People did not talk very much. They were not always very reflective of their practices. So these findings for me raised further questions about the strategies available to educational developers, the scope of practices. So if you go to the next one, so I'm running out of time here, I see. So I, as an educator, I have a dual role. I am a researcher in this research team, but I am also an academic developer. And so what does do these findings tell me? You know, how do I reflect upon them from my academic development role? And I've heard this also in many of the sessions I've attended, the changing role of academic developers, it's more increasing significance to leading. There's quite a lot of new requirements for academic developers. They should be leading education. There's greater demand on support, both because of issues like massification and technology, use of technology. They have to be knowledgeable, but still they're supposed to challenge underlying assumptions about teaching methods. Is this the right way to do it or wrong? Why are we doing this? And also just the function of the universities. And finally, I think we're almost to the end. So this is the book. You probably have experienced that when you're thinking about something and you're sitting alone in your office, you keep thinking, you find something that is out there, like a book that's going, yes, they're actually talking so much about the issues that I'm talking to in this book. I've been reading quite a lot and from Scandinavian colleagues, and they this is a citing from that book from one of the academic developers. They're saying, much like Roxo and Mortensen described, rather than forming my practices based on critical examination of values, ideas, and of higher education and potential contribution of academic development, I have simply more or less adopted course designs and pedagogical approaches from senior colleagues without questioning them. And that I think, how doing that, how to teach large groups, blah, 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 how much time am I actually spending in my practice saying, hey, should we be thinking about the purpose of higher education? So this is the final slide. No, the next one is the final slides. No, we'll just leave that one and go to the really final slide. Okay, so I just wanted to spend the rest of the time I have here for ideas, saying just, do you have ideas how we could address this? Or should we? Maybe that's also the question, and some of the ideas that were really fruitful for me were from that book I cited before. It talk about deliberate academic development, deliberate communication as practice and methods. We should really be discussing in all our aspects these underlying assumptions that we have about universities and their role. We know, probably many of you know, the role of significant conversations and scholarly reflection promoted by Roxo and Martinson from Lund. And how democratic are we in our practices? Do we have to take students on board in that discussion? And then finally, I just, of course, in my university, we are using many kinds of tools that could be helpful in that way, like the value rubric, the reference framework of competencies for democratic culture, which the Council of Europe published in, I think, 2 years ago. The SDGs are very much discussed, the sustainable educational goals, and so on. So that's the end of my presentation. Sort of taking a bit too long, but if you have any ideas and how you deal with this in your practices, I would be very grateful.
Well, just while I'm still here, I'd like to thank Catherine very much for that. I'm going to pop out, so if anybody would like to make any comments or questions or has got any suggestions as to what Gudrun's things were, that would be great. Thanks very much, Gudrun. I might,
thank you, Tracy.
I might drop you an email. That was a really interesting topic, and it's an area that I work in, so I'd like to talk a bit more later.
Oh, please, yeah. Go.
I'll see you later.
Thank you. So.
Wonderful, Gavin here. Gudrun, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just turn my video on.
Okay.
Fascinating, really fascinating. In fact, I'm from Australia, and I was looking at whether we have something similar in our education. We've got a few acts which govern education, not a single one. And I don't think we have anything quite as prescriptive in our legislation, which is interesting. So, I mean, I guess one question is it the place of legislation to legislate this? And is this a way that democracies which are in global decline need to sort of mitigate against the risk, like they might approach climate change or something? Do you see it as a responsibility of government, first of all, to have that? And have you done a survey on like-minded countries, whether they actually have as explicit legislation or not?
No, we actually have not. Not in my part at least, but the philosophers, the three philosophers might have done that, because they really have delved into more the philosophical and the social role of the university. So they're kind of looking more at that. So we haven't looked at other legislations, and believe me, nobody knew about this. So a legislation is probably not what we are really discussing every day in our practices. They were going like, so I thought maybe you need a better PR person here at the governance level to at least discuss, does it have a meaning? But
look, I think that makes a lot of sense, Gudrun, and that you would do it. I mean, really, the question was more about almost an empirical comparative legal question, which I think is.
But that would be really interesting to do that. And I assume we would find Yule is from Norway, so possibly we might have similar regulations in the Scandinavian countries. I mean, we are very similar in many ways, and maybe because we copy, or I don't know if it's because we are alike, but if we copy practices from each other more than others. But you would probably find that in the Scandinavian ones. But the Roland article that I read, that I cited earlier, I thought was really interesting, because he was talking to academics about the democratic role of universities from UK, who were very similar results as we had. We have a big role, blah, 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 it's our normal everyday practice. And actually in our interviews, first he said, does the university have a role in society? They said yes, and they discussed it. And then the second question was, does it have a role in the democratic society? They were going like, didn't I answer that before? There was no difference in their conception about society and the democratic society. But in Roland's article, he also talks with academics from South Africa, and then from the Soviet Union, the Russian ones, who really have experienced having to fight for democratic issues within their own universities and practice, and that was a very different perception.
It may well be in constitutions as well. I mean, I think the other thing that you've done here is that you've used discourse analysis, which I really like as a methodology for this, because so much of this will be behind the text. It'll be the unspoken elements. And I was just interested in how that worked for you as a methodology, just because I think it's such a good choice. And it's a very good example that I will take and use as a way of demonstrating to others why discourse analysis, which is one of my favorite methodologies, is so useful.
Well, it is, and it's. I mean, it was really useful for us to see that you have this new article, and you have all these policies, and nothing in the policy, but actually what we found in some of the policy papers with the analysis was something that you would say is very democratic, or would be under the hat of this. But it was also very, very interesting just to see the different aspects of what was seen as important for that different higher education institution. And so it was, but we also done discourse analysis on policy papers within universities, and that has always been very helpful. And I think it's actually helpful in changing practices, but because you say, okay, so we did this, and we looked at this document, and with all these documents and policies at my institution, there are 3 mentions of teachers, or 2 mentions of student, and people say, but they're there, So I think it's also a good way of reflecting back to get practitioners to, saying, oh, okay, so should we be mentioning teachers in policy papers or students? So I think I like that method as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. And I was reminded on my master's thesis, because I was actually researching how lecturers perceive the need for digital teaching material or learning material, which is also a part of the Bologna reform. It's one sentence among a lot of things that are said there. I wanted to talk with them about that, but I started with confronting them with the needs of today's lecturers to equip students, for example, with 21st century skills and so on. And my findings were quite similar to yours. Yeah, the problem is that the lecturers actually agree that the students should have these couples of skills at the end of their studies, but the lecturers were so unsure how to do that. They didn't have a clue. They were saying, yes, we want students to be critical thinkers and so on. But when I wanted to find out, and how are you doing that? They couldn't come up with anything. They just had the idea, okay, we are taking care of those students who are already critical thinking, and those students who are more trickier, because we have a lot of different students, heterogeneous group. They didn't really want to think about that, because they said it's so much to do next to the actual teaching, the actual course material and so on. So I think the Bologna reform is really interesting in what pressure it puts on the lecturers and how do they perceive that.
I think you're totally right. And I mean, working as an academic developer, my heart goes out for academics, and I think this is a very huge problem, that we are hiring people who don't have necessarily who are brilliant within their own disciplinary field. And then we tell them that they are not so brilliant in their teaching, and that they need to be training, and then they need to use technology, and they need to be this and this and this, and that's what my center is all about, telling them, how they could make the quality of their teaching better. So the institutions themselves may be judged by the quality of the teaching, but at the same time, the whole merit system, at least in my university, has nothing to do with teaching. It's all about research. So I think academics really find them in a very, very tough space. And I am worried about the young academics that come to our center who are really interested in teaching, and they want to do well, and they are willing to take on quite an extra workload to learn how to use technology and how to use different teaching methods and so on. But they are really overburdened with the expectations of doing well in so many ways. So I think it's
I mean, one of the other issues here is the question about the future of the institution of the university and its function. And this was discussed really, I think, really nicely by AG at the keynote speaker. So, I mean, he's right in saying that companies like Google are interested in bypassing universities altogether and going for, competencies which they will decide. This is a real risk. This is a real risk to the sort of thing that you're talking about. And it also underlines what it is that we actually deliver at a university, which is not knowledge transfer, knowledge content, and even skills training. I mean, I ask my students what they understand digital literacy to mean in a scholarly context, and they think they have digital literacy because they can use Instagram or TikTok, but they can't, use a proper bibliographical citation manager. And they don't have the patience for it because it's not click and whir, So one of the technical things is slow down and, apply the pedagogy and the skills of that. But the other one is I'm trying to teach them, what do we mean by critical thinking? And I'm finding that increasingly my students lack in the skills of critical reading. So I'm increasingly giving them comprehension tests to comprehend what this passage is about. I could give them the Bologna document or whatever, and then I could give them a multiple choice question on one of those paragraphs, and 40% of them will be right. Because they're not actually following the logic of that line of argument. And so much that is being handed to them on YouTube as presented as education is allowing them to bypass. So universities are all about critical thinking and slowing down a little and reflecting.
But I think what you're saying is so important, and I think this is what I felt that that's what they were kind of saying. Nobody of the 26 teachers was that participated in our study would have been seen as a bad teacher or not a caring person. I mean, they're really doing well, in a rather tough situation, So they were really trying to do well. But what I found also was that the lack of dialogue kind of makes you more vulnerable because you become an individual within the system rather than like a group of scholars. So we're not using that, like they're saying, students are making more demands. They want, like just a recent example in COVID, everybody at my university started doing video recordings, because students were not available, could not come to classes. And that, that was a kind of a remote, emergency remote method of teaching. It was great, they were doing whatever they could. But now they're all saying, I think my video recordings are not professional enough. So you're putting a professional benchmark to something that you're just trying to do to aid your students. You're thinking, no, you should not, would you want to have subtitles and music? Or, it's just, that's not the case. So they keep the demands for students, they seem to be so unguarded because we don't have a solid standing of saying, so this is what education is all about.
Did anyone actually challenge the idea that democracy was a valuable thing to be teaching?
No.
Oh. Because I teach it. I would teach it, and the first thing I would say about democracy to shock the senses would be that democracy was fundamentally necessary and implicated in the Rwandan genocide. Right, because it was only because democracy was operating that it actually allowed the majority to annihilate the minority. And there is a literature on this, the dark side of democracy. Democracy is implicated in the wiping out of indigenous peoples. Democracy is not always good.
It's not unproblematic. No, it's a very problematic
so a critical view on democracy, and in fact an analysis of autocracy and anocracy is critical. But I wouldn't necessarily expect, I teach ethnic conflict, I teach, international relations, and but I wouldn't necessarily expect an engineer or a doctor to take that view. So what democracy might mean, or this fascinating phrase of responsible participation, which is in the phrasing. No. How does someone characterize responsible participation? I mean, we have a graduate capability at the university level of global citizenship. We're trying to work out how to actually integrate that into all of our teaching.
Okay.
So global citizenship, and I would say that one way to align that is, in fact, the Millennium Development Goals. So sustainable development goals are an understanding of global citizenship. We need to think beyond our context, beyond our democracy, in fact. So I don't necessarily think that promoting democracy
per se,
responsible participation in democracy, that's why I started
uncritically, so that would be so you would apply
part of the Bologna reform are so many points. So it has to click in like a puzzle. We have democracy, we have critical thinking, responsible citizenship, and so on. There are so many points that we have to advance. Address. Thank you. But yeah, I totally agree. And it is a lot for the teachers, and I am working at an engineering institute, and some points are just a bit short there. And one thing I also see is that thanks to the Bologna reform, we try to open the universities for a whole new set of students, and a lot of them are traditionally from the working class, so they try to gain skills. They want to finish university quite quickly and then go into a job and earning money, because they don't come from a family where a lot of where the parents could catch them when they are financially unable to pay their own bills and so on. So they want the skills. And this is also a very big problem of our lecturers, that they try to raise critical thinkers in some way, but they see that a lot of students are just thirsty to gain skills and then to go into the job. And I think this, in Germany, we have the universities classically, and then the Hochschule, which is more practical. So these were traditionally those schools where you learn really skills and not the critical thinking. And now, since the Bologna reform, the universities have to do the skills as well. And this is a big problem for the lecturers, because they try to find a middle way to address those students who want skills and kind of sneak in the critical thinking, the responsibility you have as an engineer, and so on. You don't only apply your mathematics you learned, but you have to think about it. And this is really hard for them.
I mean, I'm just looking at the Bologna Declaration because I wasn't very familiar with it, but it uses language like, which is sensible for a university or a tech college, enhance employability, lifelong learning, and problem solving and entrepreneurial skills. And yeah, we as a university are definitely looking at that and celebrating, because we do actually have high levels of employability. We have also high income for our graduates, which we celebrate. We say, look, you know, this university creates that. But we're also trying to think about how to build in entrepreneurial leadership and citizenship skills and capabilities into our teaching. And the reason we're doing that is because, you know, if there is a very applied subject like optometry, you know, if you want to set up a business to go and fit glasses, and we're a diverse group of people, it's good for you to understand diversity and inclusion and everything else, because it makes good business sense, right? Not because it's sort of a nice, soft, gushy thing to do, but because it's a smart thing to do, and it's likely to be an entrepreneurial skill. And we're just trying to get people to join those, to show those connections. And it's exciting, really, because it doesn't have to be, look, there's a real problem with going down the path of just teaching skills, because the skills that are relevant today
will not be done,
especially in programming, for example, computer programming, are going to be outdated, as you know, people who have studied Pascal and Cobol or whatever are like people who studied Latin. So but people who understand the fundamentals of programming, the mathematics and everything else, can adapt to a new so I mean, I think universities can make that case. We will teach the fundamentals, and we will think about how to apply it to novel and adaptive situations.
And I think that's really, and I had I did my PhD years back in talking to academics in engineering as well, Paula, and I think one of the nicest quote was that they were talking about the textbook. The best textbooks were the ones with the wrong answer sheets in the back. because that really, gets the students to question things and say, okay, my solution doesn't fit with the answer sheet. So, and we want them to then think the answer sheet is wrong and I'm doing it the right way. So they were kind of, within very, very basic skills of math, doing math problems and so on, they were really kind of taking this entrepreneur critical stance with their students. You should not take anything for given, being. So you can apply those two issues together, and you have to do that. Nobody can blame students for wanting to get a good job when they finish university. Who doesn't? We have a good job. We like it, don't we? So I do. So.
Yeah, me too. In Germany, I don't know how it is in your countries. In Germany, we have the problem that when you study at a university and go into industry later, you get paid better than when you would have studied at a technical college or something. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that this is, bullshit, because at a technical college, you learn really hands-on stuff. And so a lot of students go to universities because they want to earn better, but in fact, they would want to learn the practical stuff. And I think this is frustrating for the lecturers and for the students. And we have to just find a way, to combine those things.
It's what they call the academic drift. So you're putting, asking for more and more education for qualifications, but then probably you do learn something at the university that is important and you can take with you, into the world. So I hope.
In some places, I mean, the other thing which I think comes back to your whole theme around democracy, and I mean, democracy has been under assault within democracies, right? So Trump's America, for example. In Australia, we've had HASS and social sciences have been defunded, and they've increased, they've created more incentives for some professions, nursing, great, and so on. But in doing so, they've also defunded HASS, humanities and social sciences. And the argument they're making is that it's not as good opportunities for employment, right? But many think that it's ideological, that people who are developing in those areas may pose more of a intellectual challenge to certain kinds of. And what this means in somewhere like United States when Trump was in power, or Brexit, and this trend of populist nationalist politics. That's interesting in terms of what that's doing to universities and so on, and whether or not this language may well not be inserted in my country right now. It wouldn't be inserted. If it was inserted, it would have an ideological frame around it. And I think I do actually worry a little when education legislation goes down the line of being too normative around curriculum. There's been culture wars and curriculum wars in my country as well around our history, and so on. So it is a little risky to start bringing in political concepts. But on the other hand, we are a democracy. That's what we are. Sorry?
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I think this was and still is one big criticism about the Bologna reform, that we actually say universities need to stay institutions of their own, who have the house right on what is being taught here, what research are we doing. We don't want the state or any European institution to tell us what to do.
Question of academic freedom as well.
I think it was the conflict on, we wanted to try to have like a big European university.
common
theme.
strength in the
Yes,
university higher
to-
education, the European higher education
Yeah,
area.
to
That
make
is
it easier to change from a German university to Icelandic university, but still there is the criticism that we don't want to have the same education at every university, of course, because we need to have a reason. Hey, come to study at my university because we are better than the others, because and not, hey, we are all the same and it doesn't really matter where you go. Then we can go to Google and YouTube and learn from them.
Yeah.
Well, it's 9:30. I think in Iceland. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm getting totally confused with this being around the world.
8:30 p.m. 8:30 p.m. in Australia. Time for me
8:30
to go.
p.m.
11:30 a.m. here.
So 8:30 p.m.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Okay, excellent. But
But
thank you so much.
Thank you to all those technical people who have invented such, a tool like
Isn't
this
it
so that we can
great?
talk.
I mean, I was thinking, because I did
Yes.
I did mistake, and I kept falling out of some of the session. I was getting really upset yesterday, and then I thought, you sit here and you're getting upset. You're listening to people, in China, and you're upset because you drop out 3 times in the lecture. You're going like, so. But these are really good technical advances. You can use them for good purposes and bad purposes, I guess. This is a pretty good purpose. So,
Yes.
but thank
Very
you very
inspiring
much.
talk.
Yeah, thank you so much. It
Yes,
was
thank you for
really,
coming.
really helpful. Okay, thank you so much.
I'm going to read up on some of the work, and is it going to be published, do you think?
Yeah, we are.
Ms.
We
Paul?
had some of it has been published in Icelandic, which is not really good, but we are also trying to publish it, and we are in the progress of publishing it. We more on article on conceptions of academic freedom, which was a really interesting thing we are trying to do, but we are in the process of writing. But thank you for both of you for really good input. I will take that with me into my nearest future work.
Lovely.
Yeah,
Nice to
thank
meet
you.
both.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.